All right, let's talk about it. It's the biggest story in tennis right now. Jannik Sinner has tested positive for a banned substance, Clostebol. The number one player in the world testing positive, or the news that he did back in March, is massive news. He has been cleared by the ITIA of any wrongdoing, but people are mad. People are wondering why he got seemingly got treated different than other players. Do people believe his story, his team story? We're going to get into all that. We're kind of going to round up all the information because, shocker, I'm not an expert on the subject, but we've got lots of different opinions from different people that we're going to put forward as far as what happened, the story, the treatment of him versus other players, the players' reactions, and then finally, do you believe him? We're going to talk about all that because this is the slice. That's what we do. It's big news. Holy smokes. Okay, welcome back to the slice. If you're new here, thanks for subscribing. This is where we talk to pro tennis players. I do interviews with pros. We give you weekly updates. We call them the slice on what's happening, tournament previews, match analysis. Thanks for being here. Let's get into it. All right, so this title of the article from the BBC, Sinner cleared after testing positive twice for banned substance. Quote, world number one, Jannik Sinner has been cleared of any wrongdoing after twice testing positive for a banned substance in March. He tested positive for low levels of a metabolite of Clostebol, a steroid that can be used to build muscle mass during Indian Wells. So yeah, that's what happened. Big time news, and it was just released basically this morning. So we've had all day to kind of think about what's going on and think about the different reactions. We've seen player reactions. We saw Denis Shapovalov say different players, different rules. We saw Nick Kyrgios basically say there's no chance he believes him. He should be banned for 2 years. We've seen Tommy Paul post a picture of his physio with gloves on, giving him a rub down, which is, obviously a jab at Jannik, and the whole situation is pretty crazy. So I've got some perspectives here that I'm going to put out there. I'm not really going to give my opinion because I obviously don't know what I'm talking about. I haven't read everything. I'm not a legal expert on the world doping, anti-doping rules, and I don't plan to be. But there's some people who are pretty familiar with the subject and have done some interesting work to show or give their opinion. And at the end of the day, the ITIA has given its decision. So it is, in their eyes, in the governing bodies, the ITIA, the International Tennis Integrity Agency, found Sinner was inadvertently contaminated with the substance by Giacomo Naldi, his physiotherapist. So that's the ruling. Now we can quabble about the procedure and the treatment of, again, the number one tennis player in the world. So this is huge. This is huge. So let's start with Italians and Clostebol. So Matt from the Racket, Matt Willis, said extra content here is that half of the world's Clostebol steroid doping cases come from Italy, often justified with similar cut healing spray Jannik was exposed to. And then he mentions another player, Mariano Tamaro. It's one of a few countries in which Clostebol containing products can still be sold without a script or from a doctor, like a note from a doctor. Whether you think that makes Italian athletes more likely to abuse or be contaminated with the substance will depend on your priors about the integrity of the substance abuse protocols in sport. So that's interesting. I didn't know that. And, it seems a bit insane that this is like a well-known thing that happens to Italians where they can get contaminated with this and that there's not more precautions taken with the team of Sinner, for example, if you think he's innocent. If you don't, then you just think he's doping and he's building muscle with Clostebol, which does not look evident because he's still pretty skinny. And there's a lot of other guys who have built muscle a lot quicker and maintained it on the tour. So that's interesting. But anyways, Italians and Clostebol, it seems to be a thing. So what happened? The event. So the story is that the international, so Naldi, so Sinner's physiotherapist had been applying a over-the-counter spray available in Italy to a cut on his own hand that he had carried out, and then he had carried out treatments on Sinner. The crazy part about this is that essentially they said the physio said he did not check the contents of the spray, which he used every morning from the 5th of 13th to 13th of March, with Indian Wells taking place from the 6th to the 17th. So essentially for the first good chunk of Indian Wells, he was using it every morning on his cut and then massaging Sinner with no gloves on. That's the story from the Sinner camp, and that's the account that the ITIA heard and I guess believed in their report. Sinner also stated that he suffers from a skin condition that causes him kind of like itchiness and can sometimes have scratches from that on his feet and back that leads to scratching and can cause small cuts and lesions in the affected area. And on the morning to the 10th of March, Naldi treated Sinner's feet and ankle, and he said he would have applied the spray twice that morning and, quote, cannot remember washing his hands between spraying his fingers and treating Sinner's feet. So, yeah, that is, I mean, that's a thing that happens. Obviously, these physios are doing their thing with these players every day, and it seems very amazing that he would put on a spray onto his hand that to heal. I mean, it's a healing to help heal a cut faster. Apparently it's a normal thing in Italy, but obviously he was not thinking, or that story is fake. That's what people are basically debating at this time. But yeah, I guess that brings us into, do you believe the story? Because we've seen Darren Cahill now go out on ESPN and lay out that exact same story about what happened. Obviously they would have had time to make sure everyone's story is the same. And I will say, when I was in Montreal at the draw ceremony, Jannik Sinner was there with his coach, Darren Cahill. I went up to Darren Cahill while Sinner was doing an interview. And I started talking with him. I asked him to come on the slice. I said, hey, would you do a podcast with us or an interview with us this week? He said, no, I don't do podcasts anymore. And I'd never been around them anymore. I'd never been around Darren. But he did not, and I don't have anything to compare this to, but I would not say he looked relaxed at all in Montreal. And I wouldn't say Sinner looked relaxed, but maybe Sinner doesn't look relaxed that much. I don't know. But clearly, and they said that this had been a very stressful time for them over the last few months, knowing that this information was going to eventually come out and probably not knowing if they were going to be found innocent or not. Yeah, I could see that making sense that they were under stress there. He ended up losing to Rublev in Montreal and then ended up obviously winning Cincinnati over Tiafoe. So that's the story. And now we get to the handling. People are criticizing the handling of these tribunals, these investigations by the ITIA. So Dennis Shapovalov said different players, different rules. Mark Pecci, who is a commentator and ex-pro player himself, had other things to say. He said, I don't believe Jannik Sinner is guilty. No one case is ever the same, and trying to make comparisons here with others is a false dichotomy. Sport, especially tennis, is a completely capitalist behemoth on every level. Yet when it comes to everything else, people expect it to be run on a socialist system. Why do companies, et cetera, have teams of lawyers and accountants working around the clock for them to make sure they get the best outcome? Sinner and his team followed the rules after the test results, did everything they could to limit the damage within the legal framework, and got the best legal outcome. That's life, and that's what this is. And then someone says, no double standard there. Why keep it for 5 months from public? Simple question. Mark Pecci says, again, not me, says, per the policy, if a player didn't accept a provisional suspension, the positive test wouldn't be made public until a resolution was reached. That's why it wasn't announced. Rules were kept legally correct, is what he said. So if he's right, and if he knows a lot more about this subject than I do, but I guess that players can, if they're, saying, it comes up to them, hey, you tested positive for this, what would you like to do? You can accept a provisional suspension. And then as the investigation goes on, I guess if you're found guilty, you would be, the time that you had already served up until that, that finding, which usually takes months, will be added to included in your sentence. That's how what I think that means. Provisional, it's like in golf when you hit a bad shot, you're not sure if you're going to find it, you hit a provisional. I'm guessing that's what it means. So his main point there is Jannik Sinner, yes, he's the number one player in the world. Simona Halep, she was also a very high-profile person, and it is awkward. Both players coached by Darren Cahill. And yeah, so that's a bit awkward for Darren, obviously. But things are coincidental in life. There's other players who are less highly ranked and seem to just get banned for, longer times and without as much coverage as Jannik Sinner got. But I think Mark Pecci's point is that Jannik Sinner is the number one player in the world, and he has lots of money, and he has a legal team that he would rely on immediately to get the best legal advice you could get in the world on how to handle this. They would get the story straight, and then they would not accept a provisional suspension to keep it under wraps. Whereas maybe other players who didn't have access to that legal team or were guilty or whatever accepted the provisional suspension, and then the news gets out immediately, then their legacy is kind of tainted. And again, a lot of these people probably are guilty, and then they get treated as such. And then what is guilty? Guilty of, having it in your body. Yeah, Sinner was guilty of that, but he was found not guilty of, cheating essentially or taking it knowingly. Also, his legal team said that there was less than a billionth of a gram in his system. So in my opinion, here's my opinion, is that a billionth of a gram of anything in the world isn't going to affect you. So the question is, now we'll get to, I guess the player reaction and do you believe it? The question is, I've had some people say, he was just coming off of between the Australian Open and Indian Wells, essentially is a time where you can do a cycle of steroids and then you're coming off of it and there's still some left in the system. So to me, it's just like you have to, if you believe that, you got to believe that like most players throughout history have been doping who are at the top of their game, because Jannik Sinner is not doing anything that we haven't seen a lot of other players do. He's very good at tennis. He's been this way since he came on the tour. His body's also looked essentially the exact same. And yeah, obviously he got to world number one. He won the Australian Open. And he became world number one. But I don't know. To me, you just have to believe that he's like, I need to get ahead, so I'm going to take this steroid cycle, and then I'm also going to screw it up so that there's still stuff left in my system, even though I have access to the best, everything in the world. That just doesn't seem that believable to me. And you have to be, I don't know. To me, it's like a conspiracy theory. It's like you think everyone's conspiring about this one thing. Yeah, maybe they are. Maybe they aren't. Maybe Darren Cahill, Jannik Sinner, the people on his team are just people traveling the globe doing their best. And sometimes a physio puts a spray on his hand for a cut that he didn't expect to get. And that's how it gets transferred. To me, that's more believable than Jannik Sinner, again, a string bean who is not physically dominating the tour, taking a substance to get ahead. To me, that just seems more like it. But not everyone agrees. Nick Kyrgios clearly doesn't agree. Tennis Sangren was freaking out on, or he was commenting on Twitter about it, and then he seemed to, maybe the story does make sense. What do you guys think? That's the story. We've kind of broken it down. One last thing I will say is there's a picture of Giacomo Naldi, Sinner's physio, back with a bandage on his finger at Indian Wells this year. This was on the day that the testing happened, apparently, I believe March 10th. So there is like actual corroborating evidence that this story was happening. There literally was a cut on the finger of the trainer. Should have put that up earlier because some people aren't watching anymore. But I don't know. To me, it's a pretty amazing story of this is, it's crazy how careful you would have to be, it seems, to not have this happen. But then again, most players don't have this happen at all. So I don't know. To me, it's a crazy thing. I'm not the judge here. He's cleared the Court of Public Appeal, which is crucifying Jack Draper in a lot of ways. Might do the same thing to Jannik Sinner. That's a question. That's a roundup of opinions that I've seen. This was also from Ben Rothenberg posting this. We talked about Mark Pecci. We talked about Matthew Willis. And yeah, that's all I got. Rounding up, what do you think? Leave your comments below. That's what you guys wanted to see. I wasn't going to talk about it, but people on the podcast were commenting that we have to. It's a big deal. We'll see how this plays out in the US Open. We'll see if he's more relaxed. I don't know. That's it. Over and out. That's the slice. That's all you get. We'll talk about it next time. I'll see you.